Greetings and welcome. My name is Jake Grayson. I'm a forest gardener and forest garden designer, and welcome to today's live stream from wet and windy West Wales. And I just wanted to talk about adaptation, not adaptation as I first called it in the actual newsletter. So adaptation is how do we adapt our gardens and ourselves to the climate emergency, to the ecological and climate emergencies that we're going through. It's not like they're coming; they are here already. Just heard a few days ago about the floods in the border between Italy and France, and they had a month's rainfall in a weekend. It's just one extreme weather event after another. We've had really serious heavy rainfall at the beginning of this week as well here in West Wales. The river Tavy's nearly flooded, and the river Kerry's really flooded down here too. So it's happening. So there's a few things that we can do. So I'm going to do this in two parts. It's kind of raining. It's not raining. I don't know what's going on with the weather. I'm going to do this in two parts. I'm going to go inside as well, and I have my little checklist of things to talk about. So windbreaks. We had this year. In July we had 60-mile-an-hour winds, and that's kind of unheard of. That's just bonkers. So windbreaks are absolutely essential. And let me just turn the camera around so you don't have to stare at my. What's going on? Oh, hold on. Oh, there we go. Is that it? Yeah, I think that's it. Sorry. Yeah. So here come the pre-vegan chickens. So windbreaks. Yeah. So it's essential. With the 60-mile-an-hour winds in July is not normal. We lost a quince tree down here. This one down here has been blown over. There's an apple tree kind of gone over. So I need to put up more dead hedges. This is the dead hedge here that I've created. I've done a whole thing about dead hedges. You can make them pretty or make them but ugly, like this one, which is in the brutalist style, and it just protects a young plant whilst it gets established. This is an Italian order. So dead hedges to protect young tender plants until your windbreak hedges get established. So this is a rather messy but effective windbreak hedge which is starting to get established on the northern border. I need to get rid of the bloody brambles. So this is a mixture in here. There's a Gelder Rose, which is this one here, the red berries on, and June berry, and then there's Amelanchier canadensis and Viburnum opulus, and then there's sea buckthorn further on down there. And yeah, use windbreaks, get windbreaks in, and get double thickness windbreaks if you can. Crikey, that's gone over, that viburnum. I still haven't sorted that out. So if you can afford the space, get a double thickness windbreak in. So this is only a single width thickness, and to be honest I should have done it a taller species. So you can even use this as an Italian alder, and I've removed the lower branches. You can use trees as a windbreak hedge as well, quite happily. And our Italian alder, there's some really upright willows that you can use too. But get windbreak hedges in double thickness if you can, and mix and match the species. So another favourite of mine as well is cornus, which is a UK native apparently. I think it's a bit dubious. So this is a cornus. This is a yellow cornus stellinifera, Flavoromia stellinifera, I think. But yeah, so this is a good 2 metre eventually windbreak, and then there's some hazel here and bits and pieces. But yeah, get your windbreaks in, and if you don't have the kind of space for it, then get a hedge in, or dead hedge or something like that. Cool. Next up then, in terms of extreme weather, is getting the water sorted out. So I have created, let's go down here and show you, I have created a wildlife pond. It's one of the first things that we did. So I had the polytunnel in, come on chicks, polytunnel and a wildlife pond. And this is the wildlife pond here. So that's all good. You know, this is the first pond I ever created. I think it's quite amazing. With oregano nettles, oregano at the top, and then kind of some lemon balm and aquilegia down the bottom. Need to get this sorted out as well. A lot of work to do, but that's good for wildlife. But for the polytunnel, really, what I was thinking about was creating a reservoir. So we've had in the past 5 years since living here, we have had 2 drought periods, like one serious drought 2 years ago, and one last year as well. So this area here, which is going to be changed, is kind of raspberries and soft fruit area. To be honest, if I was to do it again, I would put a reservoir here, whilst, you know, wildlife pond over there, reservoir here, and then use this to feed. It's a bit of a slope to feed the polytunnel, because we've still got annual veg, and you know the polytunnel will always need watering. So it's a good idea to have an alternative water source. We've got a well, but that well runs dry when the weather gets hot and dry. After a few weeks of no rain, the well runs dry, and then we've got to use tap water. So yeah, if you got the space, get a reservoir. If you haven't got the space, collect the water anyway, because every little bit helps. For the annual vegetables that you've got on, for anything under cover. Everything else hopefully will not need watering once it's established. The whole point of a forest garden is once you've got perennial plants established, they don't require watering, unlike annual vegetables down here, which do require watering, which is a bit of a revelation to me when my potatoes failed in the first year. Of course I need to water them. So yeah, that's good. And then something else as well is a diversity of species, that you need to have a whole range of different species that will work. So, just as an example, I've got there's an East Asian pear over here, and I really like Asian pears. They're a really underrated tree, and an really interesting tree as well. This is on a pear rootstock, Pyrus communis, so it's going to. My friend Martin said it's going to get super big, and you see it's a bit of a lean from the wind. And this is a bit susceptible to late frost, which is what we had this year. Had a wind and a late frost, and it killed all the blossom. So we've got absolutely no fruit whatsoever. And then we have there's an apple. There's Charles Ross over there, and a medlar. Medlar's got fruit on absolutely fine. So yeah, so you're going to get a harvest from one and not necessarily from the other. You should pick those apples. So here we go, yeah, with a medlar, and this again, it needs protecting from the wind, because I've had to stake it up, and you can see how much of a difference it makes in the profile of that. Just like this is on the windward side, and that's, yeah, it's just bonkers. It does need more protection, more windbreaks. But this has it's got loads of medlars on it, so we've got a medlar harvest despite it being battered by the wind. So yeah, a diversity of species. Don't rely on one particular crop. So I'm going to zoom really quickly back in, and I'm going to finish off the second bit of this of this live cast. So it's starting to rain again. Hold on. Is that there? Right, yeah. So, yeah, is it raining? I don't know. So, I'm going to go back in, and I'm going to talk about, from the comfort of my own desk, I shall talk about Darwin's dangerous idea and politics and kind of interesting stuff like that, maybe. Anyway, see you in a sec. I'll be really, really quick. Bye. Hello. Right then, let's get this show on the road. So, I hope you enjoyed that. Me being outside. I'm just trying a few things out. So there is, elevator music and things like that. So, and now I just want to kind of continue on with the theme of adaptation. Greetings and welcome again back to the inside. So adaptation. Just want to talk about adaptation in terms of the forest garden, and it kind of brings up a lot of issues as well, I think, that need to inform our actions. And first and foremost, it's about the ecological and climate emergency that is happening, and it's how we deal with that, and if we acknowledge that, and what do we do about it. So there's various things that we can do. The government and vested interests, and I use that term not in a pejorative sense, but vested interests as in this will form your world outlook, this will form the way that you think. They are very much stacked against acknowledging the ecological and climate emergency that we're facing. So it's up to individuals working outside of traditional power structures to do something about it, to actually put into place the changes that are required. So it's actually a lot more work. If you, and it's not saying don't work with government, or don't work with government agencies or local government or established charities. Do that work, but do be aware that there is a lot of work that can be done outside. You don't have to wait for other people. You can make the changes yourself. So that's it's a bit of a, it's all part of the same thing for a forest garden. So for me, a forest garden is very much a political and ecological and environmental and social act. It's not just a garden. You're not just gardening. You're doing a whole range of different things. So very much with this group and this live stream, what I've found is it's the people that make the gardens. It's the people that make forest gardening, and it's the community that supports itself and shares knowledge and changes things. And I think this is fundamental. And it's not a question of hierarchy. I do not know very much. In the grand scheme of things, my knowledge is pitiful. But it's the fact that it's the people as a whole, as a group, sharing knowledge on an equal basis, and being prepared to say, I don't know about something, and asking people. So it's not about hierarchy, and it's not about superiority, and it's not about dictating what should be done. It's about people taking responsibility for the spaces that they have, and the spaces that the spheres of control that they do have, and then informing themselves and educating themselves and making those changes. So it's a very kind of it's not hierarchical structure, the groups. It's very much everybody chips in, everybody gets something. Hopefully people work together, and I think that's kind of interesting and actually far more powerful than I had previously imagined. So adaptation. I called it adaptation because it was late when I was writing the newsletter. And the dynamic evolutionary process that fits organisms to their environment. And I'm going to argue, or I have been arguing, that we do this in the forest garden. We have to do this in the forest garden as a response to the ecological and climate emergency. And we have to do this as individuals, that we are constantly learning and are having to improve ourselves, not in an evolutionary sense, obviously, because in a single lifetime it can't be done, but in an intellectual and a social sense. And finally, as a society, as a society we need to do this, and as a species we need to do this as well. So, yeah, jury's out on that one, but we'll see. So we do need to adapt because of the crises, the emergencies that we are facing. And this really is an opportunity as well to to do something, to actually step up to the plate and create a forest garden, to get involved with a local community group, to get involved with a local political small lowercase p movement, to care for people, to put in place structures and processes and ideas that will enable people to cope with what's coming. So we do need to adapt, and we have had extreme weather events. So as I mentioned outside, let me get my chat up. Yes. Oops. So as I mentioned outside, the drought that we've been having here, we had a drought in April and May, I think it was, like no rain for 2 months in spring, which is kind of unheard of. I think it was really heavy rainfall last winter as well, and then 60-mile-an-hour gales in July, and we had rain June, July, August, and then a sunny spell in September. So the weather patterns are all over the place. And then last weekend, last few days, there's been very heavy rainfall as well, and it's happening. It's the same pattern of extreme weather events across the whole of the globe, and it's having an effect now. It's not in the future. It's not, oh, is climate change going to happen? It is happening, and so we need to we need to deal with it. So to that end, a resilient ecosystem is better than monoculture, and this can be taken on a variety of different levels. So this is talking about a forest garden, but it's also talking about it's also talking about the community and the society that you live in. And we want to encourage diversity of ideas, diversity of thought, and not impose one particular way of doing things. And it's kind of interesting, actually. I just think that neoliberalism, capitalism as it stands, neoliberal capitalism does not work. That's not to say that the market mechanism doesn't work, but this is to say that as it stands, we are witnessing ecological and environmental destruction on a massive scale that will destroy us. So we need to change the way that we do things on all different levels. So yeah, this is going to be kind of interesting few years. So first thing that you need to do is protection. And in a forest garden, I'll go back to forest garden rather than get into the old out there with the old political structures and stuff. So protection, as I was talking about, was windbreaks, absolutely essential. So growing a living windbreak, and I've really noticed it here. I should have planted more windbreaks 5 years ago. I didn't. And yep, so plant windbreaks, plant double thickness windbreaks where you can, and choose the right species for where you are in the world, and also the right species, and also the right species for the final height and the final diameter. So we want to be kind of growing the protection, putting the protection in place that suits our particular situation. What's brilliant about forest gardening is that one size does not fit all. There is not like a forest garden template that you can impose upon every single garden, because the needs are different and the location and situation are different as well. So there's a set of kind of principles, working with nature, but these principles have to be applied very much to individual situations. I've got a fruit fly come in. Thank you, fruit fly. So windbreaks, essential. Living windbreaks, final height, final size. Choose the right species for the right place. Oh, I did create a sortable spreadsheet of windbreak species from the Plants for a Future website, and that's and my list of articles as well. So that's kind of handy. It's handy for me to find species that will fit in a particular place. And I had somebody on Facebook actually who was asking me about species for a maritime situation and very exposed, and what kind of species wants evergreen but wants quick growing. So it's, every situation is different. And as part of that, dead hedges. I know I bang on about dead hedges, but they are such a so important to create that protection whilst your living windbreaks are getting established. And yeah, I think there's a lot that can be done with it. So for the live stream last week, I was talking about weaving a dead hedge. So you have posts and you weave between them and build up a dead hedge that way, or you've got the kind of very using existing stock fence and then putting posts on one side, or using kind of very straightforward like blocks of dead hedges. So you've got blocks opposite each other and filling that space, filling that void with brash, with prunings and stuff. But dead hedges are brilliant. They do so much. They just I do get excited about them. They provide protection for the plant, but they also get rid of old dead material, and they provide habitat and food source for a whole load of wildlife as well. So they are kind of pretty cool. And then part of that as well is mounds. It's worth bearing in mind particularly if you have for a larger garden, it's if you're installing a pond, if you're putting a pond in and you've got some earthworks that need doing, then do think about shaping the land as well, reusing the soil and the subsoil, and actually landscaping it so that you're providing protection. So I know Pam's got her world famous blackcurrant hedges on top of a mound, an earth mound. So it's like it's like part of the hedge. So that's really kind of something that you can do at the beginning when you're planning it. And it's also for a smaller garden as well. This extends to structures that you're building, so sheds or polytunnels or greenhouses or fences. So you're thinking about the functionality of these things that you're adding to your forest garden, whatever scale you're at. This is what you're thinking about. Okay, so protection, must protect, because we're going to get far more. We're going to get gales every day of the year, so get those windbreaks in, get them established, get those dead hedges in to protect the younger plants. There we go. So next up is water. So water is going to be a biggie, and I think again we want to be looking at reducing the amount of water that we're using in the gardens anyway, in our households, but also part of this is to conserve the water that we do get. Now, what I didn't mention when I was outside was the use of swales and berms. When we moved here 5 years ago in West Wales, the rainfall is, it's, I can't remember what the figures are, but it's a lot of rain. We get a lot of rain. It's a kind of, it's pretty much a temperate rainforest here. The climate's amazing, and we get a lot of moss and lichen, and it's just quite incredible. So I thought water is never going to be an issue. I'm not going to dig a reservoir, and I'm not going to put in tanks or anything to conserve water, because, well, we've got a well and we've got loads of rainfall, so what could possibly go wrong? And we've had 2 droughts in the past 5 years. There's been 2 periods of like major rainfall shortage. After about a month, the well here dries out and we can't use it for the polytunnel, so then we have to use the mains water for the polytunnel. And now, as I was saying outside, I think I should have put in a reservoir to as a secondary water supply for the polytunnel as a backup. So, and the other thing is setting up rainwater harvesting, and this applies to any size forest garden that you have. And then for the swales and the berms, again, I thought these are kind of big permaculture ideas that you will see a lot in permaculture design. I think because permaculture originated from Australia, and the water is much more of an issue there in terms of rainfall. Obviously different parts of Australia are very different, but it's that whole idea of capturing the water and keeping the water on the land for as long as possible, and letting it soak in. So a swale is a ditch that runs along the contour of the land, and so when the rain comes down the hill, it hits the ditch and it spreads out across the ditch. It doesn't go straight down, so that it kind of slows it down. And a berm, you can imagine a ditch on one side, so you've got the hill, and you'll have the ditch, the swale, which follows the contour, and then you'll have a berm. I can't do it with my hands.
So you've got the ditch, and then you have a berm, and the berm is like a raised mound of soil, and again that keeps the water in, so the water doesn't tip over the edge, but also it gets plants out of the out of the water. So for example, there's a nursery up the road called T. Ross Trees, and they have their apple trees in a damp part of their orchard. They have their apple trees on a mound, and they've just put a big old mound of topsoil in, and then planted the apple tree on top, and that keeps the majority of the roots out of the water, and that's useful. Yep. So you have too much water, too little water, and that's the kind of balance in between. So would I put swales and berms in now? I don't know. Possibly. If you've got a mini digger in, to be honest, it's a day's work, I would imagine, to mark out where the swales where swales and berms should go. I would consider it. Might not necessarily do it. Oh yeah, and Pam says stop soil erosion too. Yeah. So the other benefit of that is, with the water coming down, if you have a lot of water coming down the hill, then it will take the nutrients out from the soil, and also will erode the soil in very extreme circumstances. So I think it's very much worth considering. Again, it depends upon your particular situation. And then the third thing is different diversity. So as mentioned outside, don't rely upon one crop. And part of this is transitioning to perennials, because there is so much reliance upon annual vegetables which require so much more work. I'm getting really bored of annual vegetables, truth be told. You go outside, I've got an area which is, I can't remember what's supposed to be in there now. I think it might be chard or something, and I haven't weeded it, and it's been a couple of weeks, and now I've just lost hope with it. It's just pain. It's pain in the bum. Whereas there's another area with a mashua on there, which is a relation of the nasturtium, and it's a climber, and has you can eat the leaves, and it has roots. Has leaves very similar to nasturtium, but a bit more. They're like lobed, so they're not like a circle like nasturtium, but a very kind of similar plant. And that's provided an amazing ground cover. It's just quite incredible. And then we've got the kale in another bed, and I just it's just got a mulch underneath it, and I just think this is the way to go. The amount of time that you have to spend keeping on top of annual vegetables, like perennial vegetables, really are the way to go. And it takes time to make the transition, because you've got to you have to get your setup right for it, so you've got the right ground cover for your right perennial crop, and it's a bit of trial and error, but I do think it's the way to go. So for example, another example is I've got some perennial onions, potato onions, which essentially they're large shallots, and they make onions about this big, and they behave like shallots. You plant one in, it divides, it's a multiplier onion, it divides, and then you harvest that crop and plant another one back. But I just need to work out what's the best ground cover to grow with that. So I've got a Taiwanese bramble that I'm supposed to be doing it this winter. So I'll plant that out in a particular area, and then plant in the potato onions into that. So we've got a low ground cover with the onions. But this is all the trial and error that's required. Plus, I've got about 50 bulbs, which I bought some of the potato onions from Alison Tyndale at Backyard Larder last year. I've got about 50 bulbs this year. I've eaten one, I think, and I'll plant them out, and then we'll get, 250, 300 potato onions next year. So hopefully we'll have enough for next year, but it takes time to get to that point. So perennial vegetables as well, in terms of diversity and reducing maintenance, and different crops. So it's kind of interesting. One of the things which I do think is, it's like thinking in terms of systems, that you're setting up a system, and it's the same if you're growing annual vegetables. You have to set up a system. Charles Dowding's quite incredible that he's like totally focused on his annual vegetables, and he just has a brilliant system. He's constantly on it, and he's weeding, and he's got stuff going in, he's got stuff going out, he's experimenting. But it's this, what you don't see is the planning and the structure and the system that's in place for that. And I think this is what takes time, particularly in a forest garden where you have a tree like a sweet chestnut tree. it's going to, I think it's, I'm not terribly sure. It's a few years. It's going to be about 7 years, I think, before you start to get a crop from sweet chestnut, like a named cultivar of a sweet chestnut. So it's long-term structure, but it's putting that in place so that, sure, perennial vegetables might take a bit longer to get established and to get enough of them. Same with trees and shrubs and getting a harvest from them. But once you start getting a harvest from them, then you get a harvest from them. Yeah, it's none of this planting stuff out. So I've got enough about that. So the other thing then is a variety of different species. And what I wanted to mention at this point as well is it's not just species in terms of the food crops, but it's also species in terms of supporting the ecosystem, because time again, what we're doing is growing an edible ecosystem. A forest garden is an edible ecosystem. So you want to encourage wildlife, and you encourage wildlife by planting native plants where possible. Native plants obviously depend upon where you are in the world, but look up your native plants for your area and incorporate those into the garden. I did actually have another idea for something, but I'll take that offline with Pam. It's just like an idea for some photos. We've got there's a forest garden gallery which is coming together slowly, which is I'm actually really excited about. And there's 3 different sections to it. There's the forest gardens themselves. So there's 3 of us from put together. They're starting to put together their gardens and photographs of their gardens. And it's really interesting to see someone's garden and see how it's structured and how it works and the size of it. And then I think it's brilliant. And so I love that bit. It's really personal and it's really inspiring. And I saw Abby Sue's got some on there as well, which is brilliant. And then and Lynn as well. Anyway. And then the other side is the forest garden plants. I've been talking to Pam, who have been working with it on the Forest Garden Gallery, and I think the plants, it's actually, people will want to come along and say, oh, I want a wind species, I want a UK native evergreen hedge, 3 meters high, it's going to be a privet, and a privet hedge, Ligustrum vulgare, can't remember the scientific name, the botanical name for it. What does it look like? I mean, what does it look like when it's fully grown? What does it look like when you buy it from the nursery? What does the seed look like? What does the berries look like? Let people know, and that's the purpose of the plant section of the Forest Garden Gallery, is so that people can go, oh, I like this plant, but no idea how it looks or how it is. So that's the kind of purpose of it. So we'll be looking at different Creative Commons open source licenses for different photographs from around the web, and then putting them all together so people have a resource for that. And that's really exciting. And then the other one is polycultures, so that the people can see how different plants work together. And I love this idea that you have there's an infinite number of possibilities for different plants and different plant combinations. And it's that whole thing of like, wow, what happens if you I put ground ivy together with rhubarb and a gooseberry, and it looks pretty cool actually. But it's like, oh, I didn't know about that. Well, that works, or that didn't work, and then you get the stuff that works and how it fits in, and what the different the different climate that different plants like, and if they thrive together. So that's really exciting. And then another bit is the what I was going to ask about Pam, but she's just kind of hearing about this now. She wanted to put some wildlife in there as well, and so do you think we should put wildlife in? And going, yeah, just like, this is the wildlife that you'll see around the forest garden. So yeah, that'd be encouraging, I think, to be able to say this is a forest garden, but look, here is that biodiversity that we're talking about. And similarly, I'm doing quite a lot of work at the moment for an ornamental garden, and I'm just getting in native plants where I possibly can, and edibles as well. And I just think I'm kind of interested in learning more about native plants and using them in an ornamental garden. So I'd like to put wildflowers in, so UK native wildflowers, and putting them into the mix, because then it's like, sure, you've got a forest garden, but you want some flowers, obviously, in your garden. What flowers can you grow? So, hedge nettle or sedums, native sedums, and foxgloves, and tansies and feverfew and all sorts of different plants, but to be able to put a face to the name. So I think that'd be a really nice thing to do. And there's a lot of crossover because there's a whole kind of thing with herbs as well, and yeah, there's a lot to consider. So that's all good. So yeah, okay. I'm just going to read. Oh, there's. I think and there's a kind of question. So the question about native species, I think, is been kind of put quite eloquently. The whole wildlife has evolved with native species. So the wildlife is the wildlife that you have in that particular area, and to create a resilient ecosystem, we do not know what's going to happen with the climate apart from there's going to be major changes, but by having a resilient ecosystem is one which protects as much as possible. So it's actually that you're creating a habitat for a whole load of different species, and then okay, some might not survive, but if you didn't have that resilient ecosystem grown with native plants, then none would survive. So I think trying to second guess what will work and what won't work is tricky. Much better to say we'll grow native plants, but consider putting in plants which are outside of the normal range. Very interesting podcast on growing greener with I can't remember the details of the podcast, but it was with a forestry professor, I think, and she was talking about how there are plans to plant, and I can't remember what the tree species are, but to plant species which are normally from 100 kilometers south of the area, but start to introduce those in as a mix, and then that's kind of migrating, like humans migrating the plants faster than they could naturally, but as part of a mix, not just like that's all that we're going to plant. So I think there's kind of both, but it's kind of using it. I'm not explaining it very well, but planting native plants, but possibly plants which are outside of their normal range, so to increase the diversity and increase the resilience of the ecosystem. So kind of interesting stuff. Okay, right then. So, and then the other thing as well is different cultivars, growing different cultivars. And I never actually twigged this at all until someone mentioned it the other day with apples. And the reason you grow different varieties is so that you have apples throughout the season. And I know it's really obvious, and I'm feeling a bit of like, oh, well, I'm such a donut. I didn't realise that. And this is actually pretty good thing to bear in mind, that you're staggering with different cultivars. You're staggering the harvest throughout the year. There's I'm trying to get some work at a local development, and they have planned for 1 apple tree per house. I'm trying to get that up to 2 or 3 fruit trees per house. And then I'm just thinking the thing to do would be to have different species at different houses, so each house will get a glut at different times of the season, and then they'll have to share the apples across all the houses, rather than having everybody have the same species of apple, the same cultivar of apple, and then everybody getting the fruit all at the same time. So stuff like that would be really, really good. So different cultivars, staggering the harvest in terms of diversity. And ecological collapse. So I don't know, I don't read much. I read kind of headlines about ecological collapse. I don't know much about the science behind it and what will happen. And apparently there was a headline the other day, the Amazon is going to turn into savanna. It's on a tipping point at the moment. So what do we do about ecological collapse? How it manifests itself, I don't know. The big thing that you do know is that you want to do stuff now. We build now, grow now. That should be. So yeah, grow now, build now, put the systems into place now, which is what the forest, for me, and this is something I'm kind of, I've neglected the forest garden here, I must admit, over the past couple of years, because firstly trying to get work in different areas, and then secondly trying to get the live stream off the ground, and trying to get the course off the ground, and with coronavirus, and it's just everything's going on. But it's for me now is the time to start thinking about a system, a garden that is a productive garden, that is actually producing stuff reliably with kind of minimal maintenance. So this is my big project this winter, is really to get everything shipshape and back up to speed out there. And I think it's the same for everybody. It's an ongoing process. So growing forest gardens is part of that process. Putting systems into place now, and also community forest gardens as well. Getting involved with your community, and I don't mean this in a there is a forest garden up in Cardigan, and I haven't been involved in it at all. I've messaged them a couple of times and had no reply back. But it's not just forest gardens. Yep, it's about making the connections elsewhere, in different groups, in different ways and different levels. So, for example, a friend of mine, Dan, who is around here somewhere. Yes, he's on. So Dan's very kind of involved locally, politically as well, in different groups, and in from an ecological point of view and from a forest garden point of view, and pushing these ideas forward. And it's the same here for me. I feel that my political involvement, actually, so long as the ideas are put in place, so long as we're actually making progress and we're doing something about it, that's the important thing. It's away from ideology. This is like, we need to get shit sorted out. How can we do this? What's the best way of doing it? And you just you go along with who's doing stuff. Yeah, it's not an ideological. I'm not going to talk to the Conservative Party. I'm not going to talk to Labour. I'm not going to talk to Plaid. You want to get involved and talk to people and discuss people in positions of power, people in positions of influence and authority, and say, these are the ideas that we have. Let's do it. Let's get this moving forward. So that's my kind of degree of political involvement. Now, I did see something very interesting yesterday, which is the first time. There was a Joe Biden advert about cherry farms in, oh crikey Moses, where the hell would it be? Cherry farms in northeast America. It would be Massachusetts, possibly Massachusetts. And cherry farmers saying, we need to deal with climate change, we're not going to be cherry farmers much longer. And the whole advert, 2 minutes of it, but was all about climate change, and that is a first. So why this needs to be made a major issue. This needs to be like, the Labour Party needs to be up there and saying, Green New Deal, we need an economic restructuring, and we need to deal with these problems, to deal with changing climate, to deal with how agriculture functions, and it needs to be up there. It needs to be promoting it. So no matter what, where your political loyalties lie, this is what needs to kind of happen. So there's connections in all sorts of ways, in all sorts of different senses. So whatever you do and whatever field you're in, this is how it manifests itself will be different for different people. And then the other thing I think is greatly overlooked is in terms of the social connections is gardeners clubs. I have a local garden club here. Ros and Loz are on it. This Llechrid gardening club, and they're brilliant. And honestly, it's been fantastic just for finding out information, for getting hold of plants, for getting pots, for talking to people. So it's really good. So now, that's something else you can plug into. So anyway, that's the at the end of the adaptation. There we go. Hope you enjoyed that. Oh, I didn't record any of that. Never mind. Hope you enjoyed that, and I will. Yes, I shall go over now onto Zoom. I'm just going to put the Zoom chat in. Yeah, I did mean to record that, but there we go. So there's no editing to do, which is good. I might have to run through that again. I can't bear it, actually. Listen to my voice again. So I'm just going to grab hold of the thing, which is the forest garden. Oh no, not that one. I'm just going to grab hold of the Zoom doobie doob. Okay, Zoom link. Here we go. Copy link address. I'll pop that into chat. There we go. No, wrong one. Don't use that one. Oh, good lord. Is it this one? I think so. Come on. That's one. And then the password is windswept. Okay. Right, I'm going to get that going now. I'm going to stop that. See you over in Zoom. Thank you very much for watching. Sorry I didn't record it. Hope I wasn't rambling too much, and speak to you in a second. Bye.